Hello, and welcome to another edition of SBJ Live. I am Rob Schaefer, staff reporter with SBJ Tech. We're pleased to be joined today by Pete Nicoletti, global CISO of the Americas of Check Point Software Technologies. Pete and I are going to have a really, what I think is going to be a really rich conversation today titled Cybersecurity in the Olympics, Protecting the World's Biggest Sporting Event from Global Threats. But before we get started, just want to touch on some ground rules for our SBJ Live series here. Some of you may be familiar with it. Some of you may be the first time joining us. Welcome to both subsets, depending who you are. We really have one big rule here that I want to touch on before we get started, and that's that we want your interaction, engagement. We love making these sessions a back and forth as much as we can. So in that spirit, there's a chat function off to the right that you'll see of Pete and I talking. Hop in the channel, say hi, introduce yourself, let people know what company you're with, talk to each other. It's a great kind of place to build community in that way. And then there should also be a question module as well. And in that, you can drop questions for me or Pete. And as we go through the conversation, I'll try to sprinkle those throughout, as opposed to just having one Q&A session at the end. We like to weave those through the conversation if you have follow-ups on anything we're talking about. So that's the big ground rule to start us off. Please engage, please interact. We love it. One other thing, just a brief disclaimer before Pete and I get started. Check Point is a super well-respected cybersecurity vendor in the space. But just one thing to disclose, through some confidentiality agreements that they have with certain partners, we're not going to get into a ton of specifics around partnerships or specific activations, just respecting those, as I'm sure many of you can understand. But Pete and Check Point have a lot of experience in the sports space through work with teams, through work with large-scale events like the Olympics, which is what brings us here, with the opening ceremonies set for later in the week. So Pete, thank you again for joining us. Why don't we start by having you introduce yourself and Check Point and some of the work that you all do in the cybersecurity space.
Hey, thank you very much, and appreciate you guys respecting the NDA for all the different events that we support. Yeah, so glad to be here as a nerd, as an ultra nerd, I guess, being a chief information security officer. Talking to a sports business journal about sports is kind of a real fun stretch. Usually, I'm as a spokesman for Check Point, talking about the latest breach and the latest security issues. This is a fun change of events for me. 33 years of experience, 22 at the CISO level. I've had a couple gigs at Fortune 200 companies. I was a CISO at Hertz, and been involved at Verizon and Terramark and lots of other cool companies. Really, and taken a couple clouds through FedRAMP, so I'm very familiar with cloud security. Written a couple books and love mentoring people. And this gig at Check Point for the last 3 years, I've been really having a lot of fun because it's a 95% non-operational. So as a CISO, most CISOs don't get much sleep, and it's a 24/7 gig. This particular gig is very much focused on our customers and prospects and partners. Check Point is a 30-year-old cybersecurity firm. It's one of the largest in the world. We've been super duper successful in protecting our customers. We have a real wide portfolio that I hope that you explore. We protect the cloud. We protect the email. We've got firewalls, data center. We've got industry-leading products and services with the highest efficacy, so they work the best. So with that little quick introduction, let's jump right into the meat of the topic here, Rob.
Yeah, Pete. So again, it's just a timely thing to discuss, obviously, with the biggest global event that we see on a regular basis coming up soon here. Um, a broader trend topic I want to hit on you with, just to kind of level set and set the table for the conversation. Pretty much wherever you look, research wise, reporting wise, here there seems to be a consensus that cybercrime or cybercrime attempts are on the rise. Citing some widely reported Olympics specific examples, it was widely reported there were 450 million or thereabouts attempted cyber attacks at the Tokyo Games in 2021. There was obviously a high profile attack in Pyeongchang in 2018. So it's a natural point in the calendar, I think, where cybersecurity discussions become in vogue, and for good reason, and especially around sports. So, Pete, in your experience, what do you think are the contributing factors to cybercrime rising the way that it has in recent years? Assuming you agree with the premise, and what is it about kind of sports, whether it be teams, whether it be venues, whether it be events, that are such a unique target?
Well, it's really, when you talk about an Olympic size event, you're talking about the world's focus is on that event. So it's going to be on TV. It's going to be on Sports Business Journal and all kinds of articles written about every aspect of it. And so when people can get their message out, one of the things that, there's certainly disruption, they want to disrupt it and not even have any kind of attribution. The other risk is for the groups that want attribution. They want their message shared. And that's really the more dangerous people, because the actors behind those folks are frankly nation states. And nation states have the time and the money, and they also have the ability to not be arrested. The nations that the bad guys that are out there, we don't have the ability to show up and knock their door down and arrest them with knowing who they are. So that not being able to arrest them and getting their message out, that's a dangerous combination, along with the kind of resources that these nation states have. So we've seen, if you look at the dark web and you look at Checkpoint Research, and we also look at other companies' research, because we're all actively trying to prevent any type of issue, and we're sharing that information with the Olympic Security Committee. So we're seeing a couple different groups, especially from Russia. Right now, we're seeing about 5 or 6 different groups. We've got the whole political issue with, Russian, athletes not being able to represent Russia because of the Russia-Ukraine, war going on right now. So they've got some axes to grind. And, when you have axes to grind, and when you have a nation state behind you, and you have the time and the money, things can get pretty crazy. I for about 9 years, I did, I had 3 or 4 teams, and we would break into companies. And we had the time, and we had the money, and we had the expertise, and we were 100% successful. So we absolutely know that with intense focus of these kind of groups, that there's high amounts of risk. But on the other side of the table is folks like Checkpoint and other companies that are working together very closely and carefully. And it's really a year ahead type of an issue. Things don't just come together, Rob, for these types of events. There's discussions and planning. And then, Rob, as you kicked off the discussion, looking at those other events, looking at what occurred, one of the biggest things that we do in security is we look at what happened in the past and try to learn from it and make sure that we have, countermeasures in place. So whether it be just, ankle biters doing, DDoS, all the way up to 0-day threats, and even attacks against, government attendee cell phones. And, so there's a huge wide range of threats. There's fantastic reasons for the threat actors to be highly motivated. And like I said, when you have that type of those two things colliding, you've got a lot of smart people trying to prevent any kind of reputational or outage or any type of other type of impacting event to the Olympics.
Yeah, right. The stage is such a big part, right? You mentioned with getting that message out and having that mouthpiece that represents. Let's break that down, Pete. You mentioned the preparation aspect. How from your all's seat or from a vendor seat when you're looking at an event that has such a diverse and wide spanning digital infrastructure that has obviously so much physical attendance around it. And so much global attention. What goes into preparation and getting all the key stakeholders aligned for an event?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a huge project. One of the first things that we do when we're involved in events is we do a complete risk analysis. And I mentioned the historical reports that we go through, and we actually write those reports. I just reviewed over 150-page report for an event that we just participated in, and we were the quarterbacks of. That's the other thing, is to pick a leader. You can't have a bunch of cooks in the kitchen without a leader. So these events are much more successful when there's a very, very experienced person or team leading it. So the team members are, sometimes the security team selects the vendors and the partners that they're going to be in. Other times that's outsourced to one company, and they say, hey, look, you need to take care of this. So we've seen it a couple different ways. So that risk analysis is quite thorough, and it's probably more than you think. I know you're not a cybersecurity expert, but even me, when I look at our risk analysis and we look at all the different vectors, we look at the supply chain, we look at all the other. And it's not just the cyber team members. We look at, how are tickets going to be supplied? We just went through the Snowflake hack, and all of Ticketmaster's, attendees and everybody that's ever bought a ticket at Ticketmaster is out there in the wild with their name and password. So we look at how tickets. We really look closely at identity. How are you going to be badging and how are you going to be having access? We just saw the Las Vegas attacks that were identity based. So, we have to learn from those other types of attacks where we really look carefully at identity. We make sure that hopefully we can upgrade things to multi-factor authentication so we don't have just name and password, because it only happened 3 or 4 weeks ago where 10 billion emails and, email profiles and passwords were out there. So the hackers have, a huge amount of information on all the attendees that they can leverage for credential stuffing attacks and brute force attacks and other types. We've also seen, back to identity, Rob, I know you had a generic question, but we're focusing on a couple of risks here. But that risk review looks at identity and looks at, what can you do with various level of badges and especially if you're on the cyber team, what extra level of badging, do you, and what type of identification you need to provide, how are you validated? And then, just to touch upon it, I think we're going to talk about it a little bit more, is artificial intelligence. We just saw $24 million stolen in a fake Zoom call where 6 of the participants were artificially intelligence, tool created, and the poor CFO transferred $24 million out of his account. So, looking at, what these new risks are, and that risk analysis is really the big step. And let me throw something at you, Rob, as a bonus for the attendees. We do have a very detailed white paper that describes that risk analysis. So all the different steps that are in there and what we do with that and how we come up with a plan and a program that's going to address those kind of risks.
Yeah, it's so multifaceted as you've hit on, Pete, right? And there's intersections with physical security, as you mentioned, through identity and authentication. It's a really unique time that we live in. I'm sure you'd agree, like, with how diverse the supply chain is, how many vendors are in the ecosystem, in terms of keeping all those things
Yeah,
secure.
looking at the four big areas, operational continuity, public safety, of course, is number one. Data protection, making sure that we protect it from any kind of changes or deletions or exfiltrations, and then reputation protection. You don't want any of these large events, their reputation tarnished, and it can happen so easily. As we always say, the hackers only have to be right once, and the defenders have to be right all the time. So, and every day there's a new Microsoft vulnerability. We just went through a major cybersecurity vendor, having what may be 1 billion devices offline. If that had happened during the Olympics, that would have been a huge impact on a lot of the people in the supply chain. With not only with flights. Yesterday myself, I was stuck at an airport, loaded onto 2 planes, and kicked off of them, and never got on my flight. So things are crazy out there with with our dependency on certain vendors. So looking at those kind of risks, and even though that's a corner case and what we used to think was far fetched, even though if you look back at it, it happened to McAfee. They had a global outage. Big Fix had a global outage. SolarWinds was a supply chain, issue now with Snowflake and a couple hundred customers. And, we just had the outage with all the car dealerships because of that outage. So we have, a lot of examples. And, frankly, I hate to say this, unless you're a Checkpoint customer, we're losing the battle. Right now, cyber criminals are the 3rd largest economy in the world by GNP. So, right after US and China is a cyber criminal. So we're talking trillions of dollars of money that's being taken by these attackers, and not just taken, but also disruptions being caused and affecting companies and hospitals and governments and enterprises and industry. So we really need to take this seriously, and I'm glad you're talking to us about it, because we take it very, very seriously.
Absolutely. And you've mentioned a few people. Another thing that comes to mind, just what are the types of threats, especially as it relates to, large events that kind of keep you up at night as a CISO?
Well, let's start with the easy stuff. If you look, I look out at the dark web daily to see what kind of nonsense is available. And unfortunately, I don't speak Russian, so there's a ton of Russian things going on right now. But if you look at the dark web and you look at what's available for sale, and how it's changed over the years, it used to be just drugs and counterfeit dollars and weapons and credentials, passports. Now it's a whole area of cyber criminal activities available for hire. And what you'll find, Rob, is how cheap it is. If I want to impact your Facebook account and mess you up for the next month, it's $50. If I want to attack your LinkedIn profile, it's $100. If I want to do a DDoS attack, a distributed denial of service, where thousands and thousands of compromised home routers or cameras or grandma's PC that is compromised, so you put those things together, you start hitting the websites or the ticketing systems or the results sites or any of the streaming sites that are supporting this, you can easily overwhelm those servers with requests for information. There's lots of different ways of doing it, and it's trivial because it's asymmetric warfare. So for very cheap, I can lob a flaming ball into a well-defended, castle, and all of a sudden all the hay's burning and people are going crazy. So, so that's the simple side. The more moving up the food chain in sophistication, we briefly talked about identity. Identity right now is just now, coming up on phishing. We'll talk about phishing in a second, but identity is like the second largest vector of getting into a company or affecting, getting administrators' credentials. We're seeing that, with the Microsoft breach of their cloud. We're seeing it with, I mentioned the CISOs and Las Vegas attacks. We're seeing it with the Snowflake attacks, where it's a simple call into the help desk, and the help desk doesn't have strong validation. The help desk is there to help, and that's half its problem, is because it might be helping a criminal. So, things like countermeasures, like holding up your ID and having a video call with that help desk person, is one of the countermeasures. If you have highly privileged access, to go ahead and three-way with your manager and get them on a call to validate, oh yeah, that's my employee, because these help desks could be helping thousands of people. So, and they don't have a personal relationship with them. And I myself have created AI voice and AI video that can fool people. So having a couple countermeasures, a callback to a cell phone number, having a pre-shared, words or phrase to make sure that you're who you say you are, things like that will take care of that identity. So that's the second one. The third one is phishing. And, Rob, we're seeing this not only to the participants and the athletes, but we're seeing it to the general public, which really stinks because, here's somebody, might want to attend the event. They're looking for a ticket. And, with artificial intelligence and the way that these tools are being used, Rob, is all of a sudden now we have a couple 100 million more English speakers, for example, that can't speak college level English, but all of a sudden, and we're also seeing, Checkpoint Research points out that every large event, we typically see a huge burst in domain registrations that are lookalike to the Olympic Committee in this case, or some other event, and they'll be sending out spam based on those domains and phishing emails, and they're whether they're credential snatchers or whether they're offering up fake tickets, there's risk to the potential attendees, which is one of the risks that we look at when we look at these types of events. So there's three right there, Rob, to answer your question.
And it brings me to another one, Pete. You've mentioned artificial intelligence a few times here. How has the proliferation of those types of technologies, specifically generative AI, which you've alluded to, changed, whether it be the capabilities, whether it be the scale on the threat side of this issue, and maybe even on the protection or response side, if there have been developments there as well?
Oh, lots of developments, absolutely. Yeah, let's look on the offense side. The offense side, we just talked about how now you can use language models to create really good phishing emails. And now here's the thing about what the criminals are doing. They're not using licensed, legit copy, or they're not going out to ChatGPT or Grok or any of the tools that have guardrails and end user license agreements. They're not doing that. They're using their own tools or tools that are available on the dark web for pennies. You can download your own an artificial intelligence engine and train it and have it do anything that the law says you shouldn't be doing. So the law can't catch up with criminals. AI is a dual use technology. It can be used for good and it can be used for bad. So the criminals are using it for phishing creation. They're also using it for code creation. Creating a 0-day. If you go to any of the licensed tools and say, hey, I want a 0-day vulnerability against, Microsoft command line or whatever, it's going to say, I'm sorry, I can't help you with that. But, the hackers LLMs don't have those kind of limitations. So the code creation, the phishing creation on the bad guy side has really ramped up with the release of these tools. So you have to bring a bigger AI gun to the AI gunfight.
Mm.
And Checkpoint and our peers have been leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning even longer than it was publicly available. We out of our about 90 different engines that we look at threats at in our threat cloud, over 40 of those engines are either AI or ML, and it's the only way to find certain issues. Humans are not able to look at an email and say this is legit or not. I always, we always talk about training, and we always talk about, hey, turn your spider senses up, report this, blah, blah, blah. That's not good enough. People want to operate at the speed of business. They click on an email the second it comes in, so if your email protection, let it sit in the inbox for, 90 seconds, that's too late. You have to prevent those kind of things. So that's the kind of things that our AI engines do, is it's really focused on prevention of these types of issues. So whether it be zero-day code, or other type of code creation, website creation, you can use AI to create websites in literally minutes and say, use these logos, make it look like this, and you can have a lookalike domain in literally 5 minutes. So it really is a whole wide new world, Rob, with AI being used to attack us as well as AI used to defend us. I've got one quick example.
Sure.
Our email team is really, it's really the best tool out there right now. We're pretty happy with the ratings and what our customers are saying about it. And one of the AI, we look at examples. What are we seeing every day that a normal person couldn't see? A small, volunteer fire department in Tennessee. All the cities citizens get an email saying, hey, the volunteer fire department needs $100. What are you going to do in a small town? Of course you're going to send them $100 or whatever it is. Everything was perfect with the email. The domain you looked was perfect. The only thing that was wrong was the phone number was to a known hacking group. And without AI looking at every single aspect, hundreds and hundreds of characteristics of emails, to be able to say, okay, this one thing doesn't add up. It sure looks good, but the AI engine said, no, that's a fish. And I know it's a weird little example, but that's how AI can be used and how it would fool a human. Everything else would have been perfect.
Yeah, and how it can, like as you mentioned, scale on the adversary side, but also on the protection side as well. Let's stay with the positive theme, Pete. Talk about solutions here. Again, specific to kind of these large scale events, global events with all these different stakeholders at play. What are, in your experience, what are the principles or the properties of a proper or effective response when there is a threat detected that maybe gets stymied, or even an attack that can impact operations or impact a person or two, or whoever it may be? What have you found in your experience constitutes a successful response to those types of threats?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's a tough one because there's a lot of variables there. So the first thing is, we talked a little bit about preparation, and that's really a huge amount of the work. In other words, getting all the different tools that are going to form the countermeasures of the program, then getting those tools to where there's some kind of centralized monitoring, whether it's done through a SIM, a security event information manager, or whether you've got multiple people looking at multiple different screens. And, we frequently see very, very small indications that something is starting. A lot of the times it's a simple, one singular log entry. And if you're sitting in a console and you're not an expert, you might have false positive, where you're seeing too many of them and you're just going to sleep because your tools are not tuned and you're just, stuck in a barrage of false positives. So there's a whole tuning period that needs to take place to where you're looking at these tools. And then the minute, typically, the first indication is going to come in through a single tool, whether it's a firewall, whether it's an endpoint, whether it's an email tool. And that information needs to be shared immediately. And other people in other, program, that are looking at other aspects, that threat needs to be shared immediately and discussed immediately and then quantified. What type of risk is this? Is my countermeasures effective? So there's literally people in a room, all, 24/7, looking at these screens, sharing that kind of information, escalating as appropriate, tuning as necessary. And then once the threat is quantified, what are we going to do about it? Are our tools effectively dealing with this risk? Do we need to, call, whether it be if it's a DDoS issue, do we need to call outside carriers to do upstream mitigation? Do we need to call in other people? Because that's the other thing. There needs to be a bench. You've certainly got the tip of the spear, but in the case of Checkpoint with, almost 7,000 employees, there's a lot of people that are behind the scenes watching and helping and, in a standby mode to our people that are literally at those dark rooms and at those facilities. So, and it also includes researchers. Our researchers and other vendors' researchers are updating those frontline folks with new threats all the time. I mean, we just reported on here. I got, we just sent some, here it is, Cyber Army Russian Reborn, the Cyber Dragon Team, Dragon Force, and LUTSEC and No Name 517 or ZO 57. So we're sending those types of chatter and preparations that we're seeing on the dark web. And here's a little secret that not a lot of people know, but to be on the dark web, you can certainly be a lurker, but you're only going to have so much success. To really be involved, you have to be a vetted hacker. So it's really interesting. You have to set up a profile, and you have to show some proof of life and some skills, and be able to escalate up into these trusted chat rooms where, these hackers are actually exchanging, plans and tools and chatter. So it really takes a lot, these are profiles that have been developed over years, and law enforcement's doing it as well. Maybe not as well as we are, but they're in there, and we're sending that information to law enforcement as well. So frequently we'll pop to a website that we've been a member of for years, and it'll say, taken down by the FBI. And we're like, okay, good, finally. So, but then we'll see it pop up somewhere else 2 weeks later. So it's like whack-a-mole out there. So, so those are the kind of things to answer your question. Making sure, here's the other thing. Frequently in these large events, we're literally dealing with competitors. And you have to put that, outside the door as you walk in to help, these large events, the Olympic Committee or whoever it may be. You have to put that vendor, typical, whatever that, competitive nature might be. We set that aside for the period of these events. And, frequently the other thing that we're seeing is sometimes some vendors are counted on to do more than their tool is capable of doing. And being able to discreetly and humbly say, look, you've got some limitations in that particular tool. We need to, you're calling the baby ugly. You got to be able to do that, calmly. We're seeing certain vendors' clouds being hacked. You're seeing certain vendors' email systems being hacked, and being able to say, look, we need to get past the marketing and the sales competition that we have, and really look at how are we going to work together with our tools to make sure that we get good coverage, and extremely good response. And it's just like an insurance program. The best insurance program is never used.
Mm-hmm.
The best incident response plans are never used. And by the way, that's another whole step, is the whole incident response planning and looking at different scenarios and saying, how do we respond to this? How does it escalate? When do we get legal involved? When do we get, public relations involved? And having pre-done messages and scenarios. I've been incident commander for a couple hundred incidents. And frequently when we, jet into an incident, the people are just, the hair is on fire and they don't even know where to start. That's the difference with what Checkpoint brings to the table with these, is that incident plan and response plan will be very, very mature. Mm-hmm. It'll be tested. Weeks before the event, we'll go through testing scenarios where we'll actually, tabletop exercise and say, okay, if this happens, what do we do? And we love to throw monkey wrenches into those testing scenarios, because that's exactly what happens in a security incident, is you never know where it's going to go. There could be, something happening over here, but what it really is a distraction. We've seen DDoS attacks that hide low and slow attacks, where, we've had to tighten up the rules over here and that let something in over there. So making sure that that incident response plan is thorough and tested and looks at the scenarios that are typical. And then once again, really hammering on it to make sure that everybody works together and it's a friendly cooperative environment, with everybody, rowing in the right direction, to use a sporting euphemism.
Absolutely. Yeah, it takes a village, right? To use another one. To answer a question that's in the chat right now, Sonny, that is the public chat. We've got about 5 or 10 minutes left here, so definitely hop in or into the question module if anybody out there has questions for Pete, following up on anything that we've discussed so far. Pete, one of the last that I'll post to you here is a two-parter, and I can break it up. But let's get the first half of your response here. Parting advice to organizations, prepping, planning response, just in general, preparing themselves to deal with some potential threats around large-scale events such as the Olympics. What would your parting advice or words of wisdom be from the organization or the venue or the event side?
I think the first thing would be is to pick partners that have experience doing this, because it's such a different, challenge set than normal enterprise security, for example. You're looking at these, events that ramp up very quickly. They're global in scale. There's language issues. There's, product availability issues. There's multi-vendor support. There's so many things that you keep piling into the risk bucket that unless you have, an experienced team behind it, you're going to have more challenges than you want. So pick the right team, pick the right captain. I have frequent conversations with one of the captains on our team, JP. We have an entire team dedicated to these large events. And look at how long they've been doing it, and check their references to make sure that they went off as expected. So start with that. The next thing is, make sure they're bringing, something to the table. It's one thing to have a captain, but you want that captain to bring along a portfolio and a portfolio of success, to where the event coordinators say, look, you might be the captain, but you've got to bring in, based on all the risks, you need to bring in partners and vet partners, and then manage those partners throughout the event, and then come up with a strategy that works and and has no issue. So, that experience, the depth of the team, the ability to focus on all the different risks that a large event brings to the table that are completely different than normal business, and talking to the team and making sure that they have an appropriate risk evaluation strategy. That's one of the things. That's one of the strongest things that we do is we look at all the supply chain of vendors. We look at how it's going to be, what TV is involved, what ticketing, what identity is involved, how physical security overlaps that of identity, and access to facilities and access to network and access to power, all kinds of things that, a lot of people don't think about. They're more focused on, the event itself and the public relations and having all those things succeed. All those backroom, behind the scenes things need a lot of focus from an expert team, and I would absolutely start with that.
And then from the consumer side, the fan side, especially when we talk about an event, like the Olympics, fans returning at the scale that we have become accustomed to for the first time really since 2018, whether engaging with an event like this digitally, whether being on the ground, so many aspects to it, of course. Any parting thoughts, advice, counsel for regular, everyday people protecting themselves when they know that they're going to engage with something like this?
Yeah. So for every large event, we always see the Checkpoint research always points out there's criminals trying to make money. There's one thing where the criminals are trying to disrupt event or get their terrorist message out there or whatever their messaging might be. But for the most impact on these events is going to be against end users and people that are interested in the games or interested in either attending or getting a live stream. So, some of the things that we, Checkpoint research points out, every large event we see dozens or if not hundreds of copycat domains pop out. We see all kinds of phishing emails because everybody's email, everybody's connected to the sewage pipe of the internet. And, we see these types of, tickets for available that are too good to be true. We see if some of these events you have to pay for. So they're always looking for hacked streams. And anytime you, like I said, if the hackers are money motivated and email is so cheap, you can send out millions of emails for pennies. So the payoff is huge. They only need, 1 out of 1,000 people to buy a fake ticket or to sign up for a fake stream or whatever, or sign up for fake merchandise. So my advice is, if it's too good to be true, yes. It used to be easy, the Nigerian, scams where, okay, I get $10 million, you could turn your spider senses on. But if it's tickets for sale and it might be just half price and it's on Facebook Marketplace, you might not have your spider senses ticked off. So you got to look at the profile, see how long that profile's been on, make sure that, we just saw Ticketmaster compromise. So hackers are able to actually print valid tickets. So making sure I would never click on a link that came to me through a phishing email or even an email. Go to the legitimate site whether it's the Olympic Committee for this event or Super Bowl or whatever, and make sure you're going directly to those sites. Make sure you see a lock in your browser. Make sure that the spelling is right. Make sure there's not a Russian Cyrillic character in the domain name. We see all kinds of funny business. So don't click on the links. If it's too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. So we're going to hear lots of stories of people fooled by these things. We've seen it with Taylor Swift tickets, where the tickets were, one set of tickets on one barcode were sold hundreds of times in a Facebook market scam. So we really want to tell whoever is an end user that's not on the Olympic Planning Committee that you still are at risk for these kind of things, and you need to be, pop your spider senses into high mode and don't click on those links.
Yeah, 100%. It's the words to live by, and it'll be fascinating to watch over the next few weeks as things get underway in Paris, and of course as we all watch along from all over the globe. Well, Pete, thank you so much. Again, this has been great, a really substantive conversation around cybersecurity trends, actionable insights. We really, really appreciate your time and expertise here. Thank you to everyone who came in and out and viewed and hopped in the chat. There will be a recording of this made available after the fact and maybe some follow-up editorial coverage. So be sure to check your emails and check sportsbusinessjournal.com. Additionally, Pete mentioned a white paper that Checkpoint has recently published with some pretty comprehensive cybersecurity, again, analysis insights. We will effort making that available to everyone who registered as well. So, Pete, thank you again.
Thank you for the invite, and it's really awesome that your journal considers this an issue and invited us to join in and talk about this, because I'm sure there's going to be a couple of attendees that go, yeah, we need to start thinking about this and make sure that we don't have it. So you've done your job today. Thank you very much, Rob, for bringing this to everyone's attention. And of course, we'll amplify this message with our customers and prospects as well. Thank you very much to Sport Business Journal.
Great. Thank you, Pete. Again, thank you everyone for viewing. And we will see you for the next edition of SBJ Live.